This MLB player, Bryce Harper, had a terrifying moment during a game when a 96.9 miles per hour sinker hit him square in the face. Meanwhile, another player, Chapman, faced an equally chilling incident when a high, hard pitch struck him in the temple, leaving him crumpled on the ground before he was rushed to the hospital. These stories are not just scary, they remind us how dangerous the game can be. In this video, we've gathered the scariest injuries in MLB history. Let's start with number 1. Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper had a terrifying moment during the Phillies' 5-3 win over the Cardinals. In the 6th inning, Harper was hit square in the face by a 96.9 miles per hour sinker from Cardinals reliever Genesis Cabrera. It was the very first pitch of the inning, and the impact was enough to send shockwaves through the stadium. After the hit, Harper walked off the field on his own, but he didn't stick around. He was taken to the hospital for immediate testing, including a CT scan. Thankfully, the results came back clean, and Harper later updated fans himself on Instagram, saying everything feels good.
What up, everybody? Bryce Harper here. Everything feels good. Everything came back good. CT, all that kind of stuff. So, face is still there. We're all good. See you guys soon.
After the game, Cabrera expressed deep remorse for what happened. In a heartfelt apology, he said, "I want to again apologize for all the actions that happened, especially to Harper. I really wish him the best and hope he has a speedy recovery. None of it was intentional. And again, I'm sorry." It's clear Cabrera didn't mean for this to happen, but his wild pitch left everyone shaken and Harper's fans scared. The next player suffered a skull fracture that miraculously healed on its own. J.A. Happ. J.A. Happ, pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, was struck in the head by a blistering line drive during a game at Tropicana Field. The ball, hit by Tampa Bay's Desmond Jennings, collided with Happ's head so forcefully that he dropped to the ground, clutching his face in pain. A hush fell over the crowd as medical personnel rushed to his side, carefully stabilizing him before he was taken off the field on a stretcher. It was a terrifying moment for players and fans alike. Even seasoned professionals like Chicago Cubs pitcher Carlos Villanueva admitted the incident left him shaken, saying, "It's such a fast game. What happens if the ball comes directly at your face? There's nothing you can do." Later tests revealed Happ had sustained a skull fracture behind his left ear, though he miraculously avoided a concussion. Doctors assured him the fracture would heal on its own, but the memory of that night remains vivid. "I remember releasing the ball," Happ recounted. "Just immediate loud ringing in my ear, pressure on my ear, and I was on the ground." Despite the gravity of his injury, he did not blame Jennings, and in less than 24 hours after the accident, he was back at Tropicana Field, limping but determined, reassuring teammates that he was okay. His recovery was swift, and though he was placed on the 15-day disabled list, he expressed confidence that he would pitch again soon. The next player was diagnosed with a concussion and a broken nose, as a result of which he faced a likely injured IST placement. Jonathan Lucroy. Jonathan Lucroy was diagnosed with a concussion and a fractured nose after a scary collision at home plate with Jake Marisnick. It happened in the 8th inning of a tied 10-10 game when Marisnick tried to score from third on a fly ball. Lucroy had to shift up the line to catch the throw, and Marisnick ran straight into him. The impact was brutal, leaving Lucroy with a bloody nose. Despite trying to get up, the team trainers wisely convinced him to stay down for an examination. Lucroy was quickly taken to the hospital for a CT scan, with the team announcing they'd be checking for both a nose fracture and a possible concussion. Before the injury, Lucroy was having a decent game, going 2 for 4 with a double and a triple, but his season as a whole had been a bit of a struggle. His batting line was sitting at .237, .307, .364 over 264 plate appearances, which was well below the form he was known for earlier in his career. The Angels had signed him to a 1-year deal worth $335 million in the offseason, but offensively, he just hadn't been able to return to his peak form. In terms of defense, Lucroy wasn't having the best year either. He ranked near the bottom of the league in both pitch framing and blocking, which added to the team's concerns. The next player had his career prematurely terminated because of a spiral break of his arm he suffered while growing a pitch. Tony Saunders. Tony Saunders' story is one of the most heartbreaking and dramatic tales in baseball. On a fateful Thursday night, during his 5th rehab outing with the St. Petersburg Devil Rays, Saunders was on the mound, working his way back after a major injury when disaster struck. It was the 3rd inning, his 33rd pitch of the game, a 2-0 fastball. Saunders let it fly, and it sailed wide to the left, bouncing off the backstop. But the pitch wasn't what caught everyone's attention. Saunders crumbled to the mound, screaming in pain, clutching his left arm and squeezing it between his legs. If you were in the stands, you could feel the horror hanging in the air. A light drizzle started falling as trainers, coaches, and even paramedics rushed to him. The crowd of about 300 sat in stunned silence, and then came the confirmation. He had fractured the humerus in his left arm. Again, this wasn't just any injury, it was in the same general area as the spiral break he'd suffered in 1999 while pitching for the Major League Devil Rays against the Texas Rangers. Back then, his 53rd pitch of the game had gone wide in a similar way, and he had reacted just as painfully. To go through that once was unimaginable, but twice? How does anyone process that? The night was surreal. A fire rescue truck pulled onto the infield dirt, paramedics wrapped Saunders' arm, and he was rushed to Bayfront Medical Center for surgery to realign the bone. Chuck Lamar, the Devil Rays general manager, bolted to the emergency room as soon as he heard the news. "This is devastating for Tony Saunders," Lamar said, echoing what everyone else was thinking. And the prognosis? Well, it wasn't good. Dr. Coco Eaton, the team's orthopedic physician, said that while Saunders could regain full use of his arm for everyday life, being a dad and a husband, his chances of pitching in the majors again were slim to none. Those were tough words for a guy like Saunders, who had spent months clawing his way back. The next player was struck by a foul ball, which resulted in a fractured bone around his eye, impacting his vision and sadly ending his career. Juan Encarnation. One of the most heartbreaking incidents in baseball history involved Juan Encarnation, a talented outfielder whose career ended in the most tragic way imaginable. In 2006, Encarnation was living the dream. He'd just helped the St. Louis Cardinals win a World Series title, adding to the one he'd already bagged with the Marlins back in 2003. In St. Louis, Encarnation proved he was worth every penny. He became the team's everyday right fielder in 2006, hitting .278 with 19 homers and 78 RBIs. He was a key piece in the Cardinals' somewhat scrappy run to win the NL Central, finishing the regular season with an 83-78 record. Then came August 31st, 2007, a date no one who saw it will ever forget. The Cardinals were playing the Reds at Busch Stadium. Encarnation was in the on-deck circle, warming up to pinch hit. The game itself had been a bit of a roller coaster. The Reds had jumped out to an early lead, but the Cardinals' bullpen had kept them in it. Things were tight, and then it happened. Aaron Miles was at the plate, facing Reds reliever John Cutlangus. Miles fouled off a pitch, and the ball shot straight into the on-deck circle, hitting Encarnation square in the face. The stadium went completely silent. Encarnation collapsed, face down on the ground, and didn't move for what felt like an eternity. Cardinals manager Tony La Russa and the team's trainer rushed to help him, and a stretcher was brought out. He was taken to Barnes Jewish Hospital. The injury was devastating. Doctors described it as the worst facial trauma they'd ever seen in a baseball incident. The bones around Encarnation's left eye were shattered. Think of an eggshell that's been smashed. Surgery was required to reconstruct the orbital socket, but the real concern was his vision. Initially, there was some hope. The Cardinals reported a slight improvement in his eyesight a couple of days later, but it was clear this wasn't going to be a quick recovery. By October, the outlook wasn't good. Encarnation's vision was measured at 2400 in his left eye, and the possibility of him returning to baseball became slim to none. His 2008 season was spent on the 60-day disabled list. After that, he quietly became a free agent and never attempted a comeback. Just like Encarnation, the next player was also struck in the face. Tony Conigliaro. 45 years ago, one of the most heart-wrenching moments in US sports history unfolded at Fenway Park. It was August 18, 1967, when a young baseball superstar, Tony Conigliaro, had his life and career tragically derailed. He was just 22. Tony C., as fans affectionately called him, was a hometown hero from Lynn, Massachusetts. Signed by the Red Sox right out of high school, he stepped onto the big league stage at just 19 years old. And, oh boy, what an entrance. In his very first at-bat, Tony smacked a home run. By the end of his rookie season, he had racked up 24 home runs and a .290 batting average in just 111 games. The kid was unstoppable until that fateful day. It was a crucial game in the midst of a nail-biting pennant race. Tony stepped up to the plate, and then disaster. A pitch from Jack Hamilton of the California Angels struck Tony square on the cheek, shattering the left side of his face and nearly crushing his eye socket. The damage was catastrophic. Tony sat out the entire 1968 season, battling fears that he might never play again, but he wasn't ready to quit. In 1969, he pulled off a comeback that defied all odds. With compromised vision, he still managed to hit 20 home runs. The next year, he outdid himself with a career-high 36 homers and 116 RBIs. But even Tony's resilience had its limits. By 1971, he was traded to the Angels. His season there was rough, and not long after, he retired. He made one last attempt at a comeback with the Red Sox in 1975, but it wasn't to be. As if if his life hadn't been hard enough, in 1982, he suffered a heart attack and then a stroke that left him in a coma. He never fully recovered and passed away in 1990 at just 45 years old. Tony Conigliaro was the legend who almost was. If not for that one pitch, who knows? Maybe he would have dominated the 1970s, racking up 500 or even 600 home runs and earning a spot in the Hall of Fame. Maybe the Red Sox would have become a dynasty thanks to their hometown hero. The next player had to undergo surgery after being struck in the face by a line drive. Bryce Flory. Bryce Flory, the Boston Red Sox pitcher, took one of the scariest hits you can imagine after a line drive struck his face. It was a brutal moment that stunned everyone at Fenway Park, and Flory's injuries were no small matter. The ball hit him so hard that he was rushed into surgery the very next day. Dr. Bill Morgan, the Red Sox's team physician, gave an update that wasn't exactly comforting. He said Flory's right eye had suffered something called macular trauma, which is a fancy way of saying there was serious damage to the eyeball. The retina, also injured, but thankfully it hadn't detached, which would have been even worse. The operation at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary focused on relieving pressure in the eye and assessing just how bad things really were. They didn't find a rupture, which is good news, but whether Flory could actually see out of that eye again, that was still up in the air. He was in a stable condition, but the big question, how much vision he had left, was unanswered. The whole thing happened in the 9th inning of the Red Sox's 4-0 loss to the Yankees. Flory was on the mound, and Yankees hitter Ryan Thompson smacked a line drive that hit him flush in the face. It was one of those moments where time seemed to freeze and everyone in the stadium held their breath. This next player got his throat punctured. He is Steve Yeager. Dodgers vs. Padres at San Diego Stadium on September 6, 1976 was a regular game. The Dodgers were stuck in second place, miles behind the Reds, and the Padres were, well, being the Padres. But none of that mattered when everything came to a screeching halt in the 7th inning. Steve Yeager, the Dodgers catcher, almost lost his life, and the game suddenly became unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Yeager was in the on-deck circle, waiting for his turn to bat, kneeling on the grass near the third base dugout. Teammate Bill Russell stepped up to the plate and connected with a pitch from Randy Jones, a lefty, having a career season. The ball dribbled across the infield, but no one was watching it for long. This was because Russell's bat shattered on contact, sending splinters flying, and one of those jagged shards turned into a literal weapon. It struck Yeager right in the neck, puncturing his throat. He hit the ground, blood pouring from the wound. Fans gasped, some turned away, and others were brought to tears. Dusty Baker was one of the first to reach him. "It was a shock," he later said. "I didn't know what to do." Blood was everywhere, and sticking out of Yeager's neck was a huge piece of Russell's bat. Medical staff rushed to the field, and thankfully, they acted fast. He didn't try to pull the wood out of his neck. That jagged piece stayed lodged, slowing the blood loss. The bat missed his jugular by less than an inch. If it had hit that artery, this story would have had a much darker ending. Once at the hospital, Yeager underwent an hour-and-a-half surgery to remove the wood. His esophagus was pierced, and the injury came dangerously close to being fatal. But somehow, just 19 days later, Yeager was back on the field. Tough doesn't even begin to describe him. To this day, Yeager's near-death experience remains one of the scariest moments in baseball history. The next player suffered a facial fracture after being hit with a line drive. Chris Basset. It was a terrifying moment at Chicago's Guaranteed Rate Field. In the bottom of the 2nd inning, Brian Goodwin of the White Sox sent a rocket, a 100.1 mph line drive, straight toward the mound. Oakland Athletics pitcher Chris Basset barely had time to react before the ball hit him squarely on the right side of his face. This wasn't one of those glancing hits where the ball skims off a glove. No, this was a direct, full-speed blow to the upper cheek area, leaving Basset crumpled on the field. Thankfully, Basset stayed conscious the entire time. He didn't move much, though, and kept a towel pressed to his head as trainers rushed to help. The A's later confirmed he was conscious and aware as he was taken to the hospital that night, but the mood on the field and in the stands was somber. The game itself felt secondary after that. Even White Sox manager Tony La Russa said there was a dark cloud around that game the whole time, and he wasn't wrong. Sure, the White Sox ended up winning 9-0, but everyone's thoughts were on Basset. The next day, the Athletics gave an update, and it was a mix of relief and concern. Basset had suffered a facial fracture, a displaced tripod fracture in his right cheek, but amazingly, his vision was intact. No damage to the orbital bone, no major injuries to his eye. He also needed stitches for 2 facial lacerations, but scans showed no further head injuries. Surgery was scheduled for a few days later once the swelling went down. The next player suffered an injury that ended his major league debut. Dustin Fowler. One of the most heartbreaking moments in recent baseball history was supposed to be Dustin Fowler's big day, his major league debut with the New York Yankees. He'd flown in from Syracuse earlier that day, fought through Chicago traffic, and made it to the stadium just a couple of hours before the first pitch. You can only imagine the excitement he must have felt, ready to live his dream. And then, fate just had other plans. Fowler started in right field that night against the White Sox. The game hadn't even heated up yet. It was still the bottom of the first inning. Then came the fateful moment. Jose Abreu sent a two-out drive screaming down the right field line. Fowler went all out, full speed, chasing it like a seasoned pro. The ball ended up landing in the seats, but Fowler, he collided with the railing hard. He slammed into a low fence and the adjacent metal box with such force that it ruptured his patella tendon. To make it worse, he hadn't even had a chance to bat yet. Fowler tried to stand afterward, hopping a little, probably hoping it wasn't as bad as it felt. But the second he put weight on that leg, he crumpled to the ground. Just like that, his debut was over and his season was gone. Brett Gardner, one of his teammates, later said it was one of the worst things he'd ever witnessed on a baseball field. "It's heartbreaking," he said, comparing it to Derek Jeter's ankle injury and Mariano Rivera's knee injury. But this was different. It wasn't a seasoned legend. It was a 22-year-old kid just starting out. The next player broke his arm in an attempt to deliver a pitch. Tom Browning, Cincinnati Reds pitcher. Tom Browning was on the mound one night, doing what he does best when everything went horribly wrong. After throwing a pitch to San Diego's Archie Cianfrocco, Browning's left arm suddenly gave out with an audible pop, a sound so loud it echoed all the way to the press box. What followed was a surreal and gut-wrenching scene. Browning collapsed right there at the base of the mound, completely motionless. Trainers rushed out, and he had to be carried off on a stretcher. You could see the concern on the players' faces. Both teams knew something serious had just gone down. The news? A clean break in his humerus, the bone between his shoulder and elbow. According to Dr. Cliff Colwell, one of the Padres' team doctors, the break was about 3 inches below his shoulder, where the deltoid tendon attaches. Reds assistant trainer Doug Spreen even called the injury very rare, saying the only other case he'd heard of was Dave Dravecky, whose arm broke after cancer surgery weakened it. The next player suffered multiple fractures and facial lactation. Giancarlo Stanton. Giancarlo Stanton, the Marlins' powerhouse slugger, took a terrifying hit to the face from a pitch by Milwaukee Brewers' Mike Fiers. Stanton ended up with multiple facial fractures, a deep laceration that needed stitches, and dental injuries. Here's how it all went down. It was the 5th inning, and Fiers' pitch veered straight into Stanton's face. The benches cleared, emotions ran high, and understandably so. This wasn't just any hit by pitch. The Marlins quickly released a statement updating fans on Stanton's condition. He'd need further evaluation back in Miami, and there was no clear timeline for his return. The fractures Stanton suffered could involve a number of facial bones, but the real concern was whether his orbital socket, the bone structure around the eye, was affected. Any damage there could lead to serious complications like vision impairment and might require immediate surgery. The good news? Doctors felt confident enough to let him travel back to Miami for further treatment. That's usually a sign that the eye itself wasn't in immediate danger, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. The injuries to Stanton's maxilla, the upper jawbone, could mean some structural instability, and those dental injuries bring their own set of issues. Think about it. Bacteria from the mouth could creep into the sinuses, leading to even more trouble. And let's not forget about the zygomatic arch, basically the cheekbone. That's a tricky one to repair. The next player suffered a significant facial injury. Kevin Pillar. New York Mets outfielder Kevin Pillar gave fans one of those heart-stopping moments when he got hit in the face by a 94 mph fastball during a game against the Atlanta Braves. It all happened in the 7th inning, with Braves pitcher Jacob Webb on the mound. The pitch veered straight into Pillar's face, sending him crumpling to the ground as blood poured from his nose. The scene was intense, but in a moment that showcased just how tough Pillar is, he managed to walk off the field on his own. That fastball left Pillar with multiple nasal fractures. But here's the wild part. Pillar isn't just brushing this off physically, he's taking it in stride mentally too. He thanked everyone who had reached out and said, "Scary moment, but I'm doing fine." The next player suffered an unfortunate fate and ended up being the first player to die from an on-field injury. Ray Chapman. August 16, 1920 was a dark day at the Polo Grounds, home of the New York Yankees. Cleveland Indians shortstop Ray Chapman stepped into the batter's box in the 5th inning, ready to face Yankees pitcher Carl Mays. What followed was one of the most heartbreaking moments in baseball history. Mays threw the ball, hard and high, and it struck Chapman right in the temple. Without a helmet, there was nothing to protect him from the impact. He crumpled to the ground, and though he managed to make his way off the field a short time later, he collapsed again and had to be rushed to the hospital. Tragically, Early the next morning, Chapman became the first Major League Baseball player to die as a direct result of being hit by a pitch. Baseball in 1920 was a different game, and batting was far more dangerous than it is today. Helmets? Forget about it. Those wouldn't be required until 1971, and even Chapman's death didn't speed things up. When Mays's pitch hit Chapman, the sound was so loud that Mays thought the ball had hit the bat. He fielded it and threw to first as Chapman tried to take his base, but Chapman's knees buckled and he fell to the ground, bleeding from his ear. The umpire immediately called for a doctor. Chapman managed to get back on his feet briefly, but he collapsed again. His last words reportedly were, "Tell Mays not to worry." The aftermath was overwhelming. The next day, the New York Times described Chapman as a true sportsman, a skillful player, and one of the most popular men in the major leagues. If you enjoyed this video, just click on any of the cards showing on your screen to watch more content.